So Lucas, the Chia community, if I had to pick a word, maybe there's a tizzy. Are we Twitter pated? Like something's going on here that I feel compelled that we need to cover it or talk about it in some fashion.
I would say tizzy or Twitter pated, uh, hands in the air, running amok. How about running amok? And I assume you're talking about the price of Chia being at, what is the price of Chia today, Grant? Is it 25,
We're at like $20 still.
20 bucks? 20
I'm
bucks.
I'm I'm talking about this. I'm talking we've got a farewell video. We have somebody who I think we've actually talked about this guy on the show before, Brian Freeman. So last night he drops three videos talking about how he's jeeted from the Chia community. So he has summarily exited from like his involvement in the community. He is also, I guess, sold all of his tokens, and he is selling off his farm.
I like an Alpha Vita Zane video. Alpha Vita saying goodbye. Um,
And I had a chance to check through the videos, so I watched all three videos, and my first reaction was, oh wow, like we already covered this. Like several days ago, we were looking into this same topic, and we were way ahead of it, right? There's actually a point in these videos where he says, well, when Chia dropped below $27, I was no longer profitable on my massive farm. And this we had talked about, I think, at least a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, as we were watching the price of Chia. And I said, $25. That's the magical number that I had calculated previously. That said, um, this is a line that big farms can't go below. So I would have expected to see some amount of capitulation based on that price. And so just to add another data point to that, as we continue to look at various things going on with the chain, this I think is a really interesting one. So like I pulled up the dashboard. So this is the dashboard that Chia's got. I'm pulling a 1 year chart here. So if you look back about a year ago, we were at something like 25 exabytes. And this is my take on this. So like, take it for what it's worth, but I'm pretty confident that all this growth that we see in net space, like mostly this is farms replotting to higher compression. So this is not the result of, like new hard drive sales, lots of new farmers coming online, lots of new interest, but rather this is replotting to higher efficiency use of drives, but lower efficiency use of electricity. So this is all like accreting high electrical usage cost of the chain. And then as we start to see the price kind of turn in a very decidedly non-positive direction, right? Because like somewhere around here we were at $60 on the price of Chia, and that looked really attractive. Like holy crap, here we're at $60. We've got all this compression. We're making money, and then now we start to see the price just tanking, and this is capitulation, right? Like you're seeing a lot of people having to shut their farms off because essentially, if you're farming at this point, you're paying a premium for Chia rather than just going and buying the token on the open market. If you think about a somewhat largish farm, something like a petabyte or more, you're not going to win 7 block rewards in a month. So, like what is your $150 versus of electricity actually going to get you? That's 7 block rewards, 8 block rewards. You're not going to win that. So instead of keeping your farm online and making this pittance in Chia for actually helping to secure the network, if you want the token and you're going to camp on it, you might as well just go get it, because right now you're not profitable. So I think what we're seeing here is an erosion of the net space, because we've got an unprofitable situation for a substantial number of farms, because a lot of these farms were set up not necessarily trying to go chase that cheapest electrical price, but rather you could set up a farm anywhere in a garage or what have you. So That's my take on what's going on here as we've gotten below that magical $25 price of chia.
Yeah, and we talked about the possibility of chia removing the ability to compress plots, but as we talked about before, I think the drop in price was going to have the drop in price of XCH was going to have a more profound impact in dissuading people from using compressed plots. Where, with that lack of net space, are we with the Nakamoto consensus? Because
Ah,
that should be the number one concern of the Chia community, or the people who want to see Chia used for important applications.
well, just so happens that the dashboard also publishes this number. So we've got a 1 year chart here. A year ago, Nakamoto was at like 130, and it's pretty much just dropped to, 8 or whatever. Starting to see a little rise, like it got really bad. I don't know, we were at like 5. So, it's come up a little bit. I actually would expect to see this number go up pretty substantially as the big farms get nuked by this price of chia. So, if there's a silver lining in sort of the tokenomics of what's going on in chia, the big farms are not going to be able to stay online like this unless they are getting a sweetheart deal on electricity. We know some people have that. We definitely know that there have been chia farms that have been set up where electrical costs are less of a concern. And if you've got that sweetheart deal on electricity and you've got your farm set up with super high compression GPU, then it looks like you're doing Bitcoin mining essentially. You got to ask yourself, like, why on earth would you be doing that when you could just be doing ASIC Bitcoin mining? The whole point of this chain was not to have centralized big farms using lots of electricity, but rather lots of small farms not using a lot of electricity. So it speaks to me of like a little bit of a crisis of identity here around, what does Chia want to be in the long term? But if we do see, this sort of trend towards, well, why on earth would I be doing this high electrical thing? Even if I can get a sweetheart deal on electricity, I could probably put my sweetheart electrical deal to better use on a much more profitable chain where there's coin price appreciation versus the coin price erosion that we've seen pretty continuously from Chia.
Well, I hope that we see more small end farmers, and that the Chia community figures out a way to promote and to get the narrative out that is needed.
Well, if we see a return to uncompressed plots, right? So if we see a hard cutover and saying that's what we want, this might actually be the opportunity to do it. It's like, all right, big farms aren't profitable anyway. We're going to hard fork to, uh, a way that makes it so that we get back to a high Nakamoto coefficient, and sort of that's what's desired on the chain. Might be the right time to do it because you're going to see big farm capitulation regardless at this price of chia. And so unless there's some major catalyst that drives chia price much higher, you're probably not going to see those farms come back. And I think with somebody like Brian Freeman being likely the the prototype or the I guess the word's escaping me on like
Paradigm.
paradigm, yeah, the paradigm for capitulation here. I think you're going to see this repeated because I don't see the price action catalyst happening anytime soon.
Well, and also going back to Brian, he had a couple of other complaints that I think are important to address. He called out, or mentioned, called out. Let's say mentioned. Use the Latin. Use the Latin. It's so much kinder. He mentioned the disappointment with the use of the chia pre-farm, and the pivot with the use of the chia pre-farm seemed to come as a reaction to expectations of the IPO process with the SEC.
Right. This was a change in direction, right? Chia had, and this is pretty well covered in Brian's video. So actually, I want to give him credit for this one because I don't think anybody's really done a good rundown of all the times that Chia Network Incorporated said they were never going to sell the pre-farm. I mean, this was repeated over and over and over again. I distinctly remember this. And so one thing that Brian does well in his videos is just to run this down and saying, here's Bram saying it, here's Gene saying it, here it is, repeated, repeated, repeated. Then there's this major change, like a 180 when, what was it, the XRP decision came down that said, if your token is sufficiently decentralized, at that point you can sell pre-mined coins. Is that, do I have that right, or what are you thinking here?
No, it was right at the Torres decision, and I think that had, again, going, like there were expectations amongst the founders and the members of CNI as to what the legal status of other chains were and what the actions of the SEC were, and rules had been written down and people were not playing by things as they were written. But as we've come to discover, the legal process is a political process, and the role of crypto has changed dramatically since June of last year. I believe, was it June or July that
is this the one that we're talking about?
Yes, this should be the Torres decision. Look at the date, March 26th. I don't know. I think the actual decision came a little bit later.
Well, I'm just looking at here. It's talking about their pre and Torres SEC.
Well, yeah, and there were expectations amongst like, depending on who you asked in the crypto community, there are people who said that the SEC has been changing the rules. That's been the line of Coinbase, with Coinbase. Ripple had stated that also the SEC had not been forthcoming in their engagement, and that was a large part of the problem. And of course, the judge, as crypto gained in popularity, let's not forget also the collapse of FTX and the fact that crypto had been gaining momentum going into even the previous year. What was it, 2022 of November, that FTX collapsed.
Well, this harkens to your assertion that these institutions are inherently political, right? We've talked about this within the scope of the Supreme Court, saying this is not an impartial body, and it never has been. And you gave us very clear, examples going back, into the 1800s, where it's like, okay, here's this decision. Then we have a president who comes in and says, well, I didn't like that decision, so I'm going to put my judge in there. And then we see an immediate reversal of the decision. So it's like, we definitely can see that these political institutions, or that these regulatory institutions, are not divorced from political ties, right? And so when we see in the world, right, that we've got this massive swing towards crypto, and I'm talking about stuff we've covered as well, where we've got the Winklevosses giving $1 million to Trump, you've got the guy from Kraken giving $1 million to Trump, and whether those are valid political donations or not, you can see this swing, right? It's like, hey, the crypto community, all these people, they are motivated to vote and give money to politicians. You saw Sam Bankman-Fried sort of, splaying crypto money all over the place. So, for the political elite to ignore this body is sort of to ignore not only a voting block, but also to ignore that there's money to be had for their political campaigns and the influence that goes along with. And so I'm not shocked at all to sort of see the SEC get a quiet phone call in the middle of the night saying, rein this in, like, what are you doing here?
Well, and the SEC was not, going into the Torres decision. I'm gonna buff my nails here and shine them on my lapel. But I said the SEC is not created to handle concepts of money or currency. It was created to handle concepts of financial instruments. And so I think that those people who understood the difference between money and finance understood that the SEC was not well suited to be approving or disapproving private monetary systems.
Well, they were kind of being looked at as the arbiter of what's money and what's security, right? I mean, where they were sort of being said, oh, the SEC is going to be the referee or the gatekeeper or the shot caller, right? The sort of that was touted as their responsibility. It's like, oh, the SEC is going to make a determination.
Well, but and I mean, think about, and this is one of the great gift of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, of blockchains, has been to help re-educate the world and people who are outside of a state monetary system as to the difference between finance and money, and how. And this is something that we see politicians really begin to understand in Torres. So you have a judge in Torres who is faced with this, who are they going to declare the winner and the loser? And what do they come up with instead? They say, well, it's split. Like the Torres decision was a split decision, and it said, yes, there were some institutional investors who were wronged, but at the same time, this is a money, not a security. This is a currency. So at that point, and I guess the thing too, because yesterday, I don't know if you caught the Secretary of the Treasury's address towards the House Financial Services Committee, but we still see politicians who don't understand.
Wait, just to make sure we got this right. So I want to make sure I get the right thing on the screen here. So I think I had an article on there, but this is the one, right? So we've got Ripple versus the Securities and Exchange Commission. This was the decision from Annalisa Torres, the district judge, right? This is the one we're talking about, right?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, and essentially, I think what was said here was there was some amount of what happened which could be deemed a security, right? Which was when you had insiders who were buying stuff with the expectation of profits based on a cabal of a small number of people who were in a position to, act as a common accord, to group up to make money, and that there was an expectation of profits. And all of this is the Howey test, right? But then
Yes.
what they're saying here is that there was some amount of what happened with Ripple that wasn't that, and that there's a distinction between the two. So like some of this is security, some of it isn't, and this is where it starts to get into, well, what's really going on this chain, and were secondary sales, part of the whole security thing, and essentially saying, well, the first sale was, but any secondary sale, anything else that happened, where exchanges were selling Ripple or whatever, that wasn't considered to be security sales, because this is just, like wide open to the open public. And that's the point at which I think, Chia looked at it and said, well, we can sell it off because now the majority of what token is out there is sufficiently decentralized or whatever. I remember those words being repeated pretty consistently, is that sufficiently decentralized.
Absolutely. And even to, fast forward to the Fit 21, there's this notion that the SEC is going to be, and it's not law yet. Fit 21 is merely merely the proposed legislation that's been passed by the House, but not by the Senate, and not been stamped by the president. But what Fit 21 proposes is that the SEC will be doing what it's traditionally doing, and that is protecting institutional investors as to like the disclosure of what's going on with the securities offering. And that's what the SEC does. They're all about disclosure, disclosure, disclosure. And they have used that small bit of authority to try to deny anyone who's not playing according to their rules from the ability to engage in the offering of securities. But whenever you're talking about creating a money or a currency, that's not a security. And so if something is decentralized, if it's being used to pass around as an exchange of value or an exchange of goods, Like it's as if government all of a sudden says, "Aha, there is a difference between that. So who's going to take care of that?" And that's whenever we've seen, and even leading into the Torres decision. Remember, there was the commodities futures.
CFTC, right?
Yeah, the CFTC. I forget what that alphabet soup all stands for, but essentially commodities.
Commodities and Futures Trading Commission, if I recall
There,
correctly.
beautiful, tiny, much smaller, but the proposal.
They're the ones that famously are responsible for looking at frozen concentrated orange juice, if I recall my education and financial history from 80s movies.
That is a brilliant movie.
Yeah, it's like if you want to get a good financial education, don't look to the colleges. There's two movies you need to look at. You need to watch Trading Places and The Big Short, and I think The Bear Trap's going to be in amongst that list as well, which we haven't had a chance to talk about. But God, I'm going to bring it up because these three movies essentially tell you more about like how our financial institutions work than I think almost any financial education that you could get anywhere. Like these really get into the nuts and the bolts of like, well, how manipulated are things? How bad is it really out there, and really what's going on?
Yeah, I've never seen The Bear Trap. What what
Ah,
is?
this one's brand new, so we'll get to it in a minute. But I'll just that's foreshadowing for the second half of the show, or like the end.
Well, but and so yeah, let's continue on and maybe get back a little bit to
Right.
Chia.
Yeah. The only reason we're talking about this is because we wanted to talk about the CFTC, right? Like what is the role of this entity, and in some ways it's like these are peers, right? The SEC and the CFTC, they sort of have their own purview of what they're supposed to be doing within the market, but they're ostensibly supposed to be doing a similar type of things, but just within, like the CFTC is supposed to be doing things with, commodities. And commodities canonically are things like, oranges and wheat and stuff like that, like real commodities, not this weird concept of, Bitcoin as a commodity. That's such an odd thing for me to think about.
Just an aside too, because I think there's commodities and there's the commoditization of securities, and I think that is what ETFs are. In my mind, when I think about what a commodity is versus what a security is, I think a commodity rots and a security rusts, because the trading and using those as an exchange of value is very different due to the if you have grain or orange juice or these other things, the value, they need to be passed around more quickly. They have.
Well, that's the thing with a commodity, right? When you're trading in futures and commodities, famously and hilariously, there have been these instances where people have had these open futures positions on a commodity, failed to close the position, and actually took delivery of something that they had no ability to deal with. It was like I think this might have happened in New York or something, where like one New York trader or something forgot to close out their position, and then a barge showed up with some massive amount of grain or something, and they're like, what am I supposed to do with this? And it's like, well, you bought the contract, like, here we go, we're delivering you your future contract of grain or hog toenails or whatever it is that you bought a future on. And so you wanted delivery, and here it is, it's in your lap.
Yeah, if you're going to hodl a commodity, you better be prepared for it, and you better have some real world assets like grain silos.
Yeah,
um,
because I mean, and there's like a real world utility on this. I mean, if you're going to, I don't know, make beer at an industrial scale, you buy futures of grain because you say, I need to normalize out the price. I can't have these price shocks where suddenly, I was buying grain at 25 cents per bushel or whatever it trades at, and then 6 months later it's trading at $5 per bushel. Like a price shock like that would kill my business. So I've got to try and normalize out the price, and so I'm gonna say, well, at bare minimum, I want to take a future delivery at some price, and that's the whole point of like a future. Like it's to try to say I need to normalize the price of something in the future because I intend to use it.
and what happens whenever we put something that's also being constantly generated like a commodity and that rots very quickly? And I'm thinking of electricity here. What happened whenever we opened the electricity grid to futures contracts? And the answer is Enron and rolling blackouts in California. So
Okay, so how we got to this topic was we were talking about the SEC, Chia, like whether it's the CFTC or whatever, and Torres. All right, so let's unwind, and now we explained a little bit about the CFTC. Let's get back on topic.
okay, well, we'll go back. So long story short, CNI had expectations, as did many people, with the long-standing narrative of the government going into the Torres decision. But with the collapse of FTX, and again, the federal government like writ large, is a complex institution of entities who don't necessarily talk to each other. And so, you saw the House selecting and grooming FTX to be its entry or opening up the United States into crypto. That blew up in their face. And meanwhile, you have the SEC trying to tamp down on Ethereum, giving up on Bitcoin, and also trying to tamp down on other players coming into the crypto markets. And with the collapse of FTX, they had to change tacks, and we've seen not only the judges, the judicial or the legal understanding of where crypto is changed. We've also seen politicians change, like now Trump and our presidential candidates are talking about courting crypto, about turning the United States into recreating the .com era, or the tech, the code the world sharing economy of that followed .com. Bringing that and looking at crypto as that next wave in technology, crypto/AI. So we've seen a huge change in the political narrative regarding crypto, and in doing so, that gave, I guess CNI understood that gave them the option to open up and sell part of that pre-farm. I don't disagree at all. I mean, I think that, to me, the more important services or possibilities that the smart coins of Chia, the security of the Lisp language coupled with smart coins in a coin set model makes them incredibly appealing to some of the most important government institutions, and those are central banks. And we've seen that with the World Bank selecting Chia to be the carrier of their carbon action data trust program, which is going to be crucial in their determination of what the rates are for the loans given out by the IMF to the various countries of the world.
Right. So we've got this situation set up where Chia was selected to run something for the IMF, for the World Bank. It's running carbon trading, and there's a point at which Chia, I don't know, like runs out of money or is on track to run out of money, and so given Torres and Brian covers this in his video, where they say, all right, we can start selling some of the pre-farm. This is a 180 reversal. And I think Brian does this well. He talks about the various times at which CNI had come forth previously and had said, hey, we're never going to sell the pre-farm. We're never going to sell the pre-farm. We're never going to sell the pre-farm. He goes through this extensively in video number 1. And at some point they're like, no, we're going to start selling the pre-farm, and there's a reversal on this. And I think what we're saying here is Torres sort of predicated this. It was the Torres decision that sort of turned the tide and said, all right, if this is the case, if this is the way that the world works, then we can do this. And what that allows CNI to do is to not have to raise money, which I think that they failed to do. They had raised a bunch of money in the past, and then they went out and tried to raise some more money because they wanted to continue operations, and they, I think, tried to put a round together, and that round didn't close or didn't go the way they wanted it. And so they said, all right, well, I guess we're going to sell some of the pre-farm. So now we've got sell pressure from CNI. And one of the things Brian talks about is that he says, well, this sell pressure from the pre-farm has actually affected the price. That moving 50,000, 100,000 Chia tokens is actively affecting the price because there's not an offsetting buy side to these tokens, and so it's causing the erosion of price of the Chia main base token.
Well, and I mean, and he's not wrong, but at the same time, like in the assignation of blame, I don't think that it. If we wanted to go out and blame or find anyone at fault for not making the right expectations of government, then we should all just go out and start digging ditches. The I applaud Chia for having versatility and having pivoted and adapted to changes in the political sphere.
Right,
But
they're paying attention to what's going on. They're saying, well, if this is the law of the land, here we go. I think one of the criticisms that the SEC has had and that we've said is that they're not applying the rules consistently. They're sort of, and this even came up in Torres, right, where the SEC was called a bully, right? Gensler has come out and said, oh, if you come in and register, if you come in and play by the rules, then everything's going to be fine. Well, Chia's been trying to play by the rules for this has got to be going on 5 years now, where they're trying to get across the line, and they've been, I would say the right word is stymied by the SEC's intransigence and getting anything done. I mean, sure, they had this thing that happened with what was it, their banker going belly up, which may tie into.
that was a fluke. I mean, like, how crazy is it that they lost the seed phrases to their Bitcoin? This is the new world that we live in, though. But there's something else that we haven't talked about that has also changed, and very recently, and that is great news for Chia and for all of crypto, and that is the repeal of Chevron Deference. As the Supreme Court decided.
Ooh, yeah. Wait, let's get something on the screen for that. So, yeah, because this to me was shocking when you told me that Chevron deference is going to have an impact on crypto. I don't think that this one's been tied together. Like, I think that there have been discussions about like what does Chevron deference mean and like where is it going to impact things, but like how does it touch crypto? You got to enlighten us, Lucas.
Well, it does it, like, number one, going back to our judiciary is 100% political. Well, so are regulatory institutions. They care about their reputation. And just like in reality, it's not debt that backs our money or gold that backs our money, but the reputation of the United States and what money is being used for, the integrity of the people who are providing money. In the same way, also, like we've seen regulatory institutions hide their bullying by having their own private judiciary and being able to have a kangaroo court that approved the rules that they had made that were outside of the feedback of of our electoral system and legislatures. And we're not going to see. I mean, some people say, "Yay! Now we're going to see the rulemaking done by Congress." No, we're not going to see. We're not going to see rulemaking done by Congress. What we're going to have to see is bona fide, like, best interest of all the player rules coming from these regulatory institutions, and they are going to become more advisory because they don't have a stick, like the teeth in turning or shutting people down is, that's not going to look good for them, and they are going to need to uphold their reputation. So I would guess that we begin to see many of our regulatory agencies going out and educating and saying, you know, this is what this company is up to. Beware. This is
Chevron deference, the way that I understood this when I first started looking into it, because this happened recently, like we were talking about like a week ago or so, right? Like that this
Mhm.
got handed down. Um, what this said was that the ability of regulatory agencies to make calls is now in question, or it's been struck down. Like these regulatory bodies can't just like arbitrarily decide things that don't have strong grounding where guidance has been supplied, right? Is that sort of in a nutshell, or like just tell us what Chevron is, like of your understanding, or maybe we should just read it right off of this, Cornell law. I bring this one up occasionally, but like that's the way that I read Chevron.
Well, the important principles of administrative law, like you hear Republicans complain about the administrative state and about these regulatory institutions being able to make rules and interpret them as law whenever they had not been subjected to an electoral body, a legislation. And so with the repeal of Chevron deference, and I mean, uh, the we have taken the authority of these administrative bodies. I like the notion when I say administrative, or when politicians say administrative, like
Well,
we
wait, I think we got it right here. So
okay,
like,
go for it.
yeah, let me just read this section.
Save me, yes, please.
Yeah. In subsequent cases, the Supreme Court narrowed the scope of Chevron deference, holding that only the agency interpretation reached through formal proceedings with the force of law, such as adjudications and notice of comment rulemaking, qualify for Chevron deference, while those contained in opinion letters, policy statements, agency manuals, or other formats do not carry the force of law and are not warranted a Chevron deference in such cases. The court may have given a slightly less deferential treatment to the agency's interpretation, giving a persuasive value under the court's Skidmore deference analysis. So, like to me, what this is saying, or the way that I read this, is that you have to have a pretty formal process, and you've got to have something that either like originally started from a law or had some adjudicative process behind it. Otherwise, it doesn't carry the force of law. And so this means you can't just shoot from the hip, to get these things, rolling and have them carry the force of law. I think that this is a significant narrowing of the way that bodies like the SEC would have the ability to do something. Like if they want to say, well, this is how things are going to work, then there has to be public comment. There has to be this, actual, disclosure of like how it's going to work, and that's definitely not how the SEC has been operating.
Well, but the main thing is because they've already have their comment periods and their proposed rulemaking process, et cetera, et cetera. That's not enough, or because what they've used is whenever a stakeholder or somebody was complained about some of the rules that they had made, they had their own judicial arbitration. They had their own court system. And this has removed that court system. It says no, they have to go to the judicial branch as it exists, and that the judicial branch is already clogged down or is not well disposed to handle them or understand these nuance is no excuse. And that means that we are going to see, whereas before you could have the SEC like make their own rules and then have their own review. And now it goes to a greater review board. And this is also like we talked about how can it be that the SEC is trying to says that Coinbase is an illegal exchange. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice signs a deal with Coinbase to use it to liquidate the assets that it has accumulated through or confiscated.
Yeah, confiscated from the Silk Road. So this is the Coinbase partnering with U.S. Marshals, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yes, and one might ask oneself and be very be wise to do so. Like how if both of those institutions are part of a government, how does one hand say this is good and one hand say this is bad? And this is why we have this is why we have the Constitution set up the separation of powers and checks and balances so that a complex organization like the government would not go off on these tangents and in one hand say crypto great, Coinbase great, and another hand say Coinbase is breaking the law.
Yes, that Coinbase is operating in illegal, is trafficking in illegal securities. Yet here we have another arm of the government that, what, the U.S. Marshal Service is part of the Department of Justice, right? I mean, this like falls to like the main legislative or the main judicial enforcement division of the government is like working with Coinbase. Like,
of the federal government, yes, the marshals are the custodians of assets seized by the Department of Justice.
right. So if they go and do a big drug bust, whatever, and there's a bunch of cash that they seize or a bunch of gold or whatever, the U.S. Marshals is the custodian of that. Is that how it goes?
Yep. So they must have a seed phrase of a wallet somewhere with a
They've got a multi-sig or something somewhere. They're
Yep.
holding this Bitcoin.
I mean, like, what would happen if they forgot their seed? Like, some bank in Utah did.
That'd be bullish. That'd be bullish for Bitcoin.
That would be, but we're not going to see that. I doubt, because could the NSA have the power to retrieve that? Who knows? Now we've wandered off in the world of conspiracy theory. So long story short, the CNI has reacted to an imperfect process of our government, and maybe they could have done some things differently. They still could also be, to me, there's still a great green light, because at the end of the day, what is Chia about? Chia, again, is about a more advanced blockchain than we've seen anywhere else, or at least that I have seen anywhere else.
Well, I mean, that's definitely the case. I mean, we when you talk about what's possible on Chia, right? There are things that are being done here that haven't really been demonstrated, I think, in a substantive way on other chains, and some of the things that are possible to do because of Chia Lisp, right? And then we've talked about this like pretty extensively, that it is possible to do things on Chia in a way that is just so different from anything that exists out there in the world, because of these two things, the coin set model plus Chia Lisp. And that allows you to create things that are just so substantively different that it took us probably at least 2.5 years just to get to the point where people outside of CNI were capable of doing, really interesting things. And now we're at that point where you've got these very innovative companies that are launching things that have been attempted on other chains and like kind of didn't work that well. And we haven't been able to see it play out yet that it really has worked on Chia, but we're going to get to find out in like the next couple months. And it's stuff that we've talked about here. Like we had them on the show. Like we had the new stable coin on the show. We had the bridge on the show. So we've talked to the various innovators, even in the last few weeks of what's about to be launched. So yes, I think you're 100% right that Chia's got some secret sauce here that is hard to replicate in other places.
Well, and there's also, Chia has been in a bind in that the crypto community has not wanted to hear about CBDCs, and has been, I mean, even like politicians have begun to grapple and to understand and to fear CBDCs, and it's a hard thing to make the case that like that having or that the best solution to something that's inevitable is to make sure that it is secure and make sure that it's open and public. And that, I think, is a hurdle that we begin to approach, because on the heels of the Fit 21 proposed legislation, there was also quote unquote anti CBDC legislation that was proposed. However, if you begin digging into the anti CBDC legislation, it's about ending the Fed. It's another end the Fed bill. And I would love to see, because we talked too about the administrative state. Well, the Federal Reserve is one of the original institutions that gets out of legislative control and sidesteps this question of, can the federal government be engaged in the creation of currency by by making an unholy alliance with a quote unquote private institution. Well, it's not private, and it has been out of control of the American public, and has been captured by financial institutions with regards to what its policy decisions are. So this is a huge problem. But as we know, using technology, using code, um, using computer networks to make something public is part of fixing that problem. So I
Well,
think,
I mean, the Republicans threw down the gauntlet here. Like, I don't know if you had a chance to review their latest platform, but like, talking about central bank digital currencies, I mean, they call it out specifically right here and saying, oppose the creation of a central bank digital currency. Like,
yeah,
blam.
but the I mean, talk about not under. I mean, like if you zoom out and look at some of the planks of their platform, they also say we're going to end inflation. We're going to write a rule and say that you can't inflate prices anymore. And then they turn around and complain about Bukele saying to the grocers of El Salvador, stop inflating your prices. And oh, what does that sound like? It sounds like a CBDC.
Well, it depends. I mean, if and there's been rumblings in this direction. I don't know how serious it is. Like, to me, this feels like electioneering. I think is the right word for it, right? But that's when you say things to a political base with the specific stated purpose of trying to gain votes for whatever it is that you want. I believe that's referred to as electioneering. That, like, it looks like if you were to say Bitcoin and mining and strategic reserve asset and sort of all the things that the Republican Party seems to be doing to court these votes, it sure seems like ending the Fed and switching to a Bitcoin standard. That would be there would be a lot in the Bitcoin community that would salivate at that, right?
Well, sure, but having some sort of a notion of a stable coin and the ability to have a currency that's limited in its inflation is more important than what's behind it. And what we're seeing with Germany, with the U.S. Marshal poised to be liquidating Bitcoin, like Trump talks about using Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset. Again, as we begin to understand the laws, the rules in the Constitution that were actually laid down with regards to money, we're going to figure out that the federal government is not allowed to make currency, that it's limited in specie to gold and silver, that Bitcoin may be what Bitcoin is. Other countries who have been uh, who we have controlled through the use of the dollar as the world. There's another plank in here that says we're going to make sure that the dollar is the world reserve currency. You don't if you want people to use your money, you don't walk around the schoolyard and say you have to use my money. This is something that politicians have not begun to understand yet. Like, if we want to control the rest of the world by giving them a currency, or have them use the dollar as the world reserve currency, then we have to be honest about the money that we're using, and we can't give it out with the threat of, if you don't buy what we wanted you to buy with this, we're not going to let you use it.
So, I mean, this almost to me seems like that what's being contemplated here is a shuffling of what it means for there to be a dollar, and Michael Saylor and various people in the crypto world have discussed this idea that you could use Bitcoin to back these different currencies. If that were to actually be the case, that would be crazy style sort of something happening to Bitcoin. But if you were to say, well, the U.S. dollar is redefined as something that's backed by Bitcoin, and then that this is the world reserve currency somehow, I think that there's a muddied message here in this platform, and that's why, to me, this all looks like electioneering. It doesn't look like a serious policy proposal for actually how this would be enacted. The platform is always just this mash of you know fraught with political process of how anything even gets in here. And when it gets published, it's sort of, none of the politicians are held to this. This isn't like a binding document. This is just like, what the the people who are in control of this process were thinking about at the time, and how they're trying to, gain votes.
Well, and so say you could take one of these ETFs that's a Bitcoin based ETF and issue a currency based off of the Bitcoin that's held in a multi-sig vault or wallet or whatever. Would you be doing that on the Bitcoin network, Grant? You're a developer. Is that possible?
No, it's certainly
Right.
not possible. Like, you
Would you,
can't do
would you
it.
would you be choosing a blockchain that had a more secure and more advanced language? Yeah, you know what? Sounds a lot like Chia to
It,
me.
it
So,
totally it totally points towards Chia, especially if that Nakamoto consensus like sufficiently came up, and like we were really operating in the way that Chia had originally hoped to, which was to, use the spare capacity of hard drives from all over the planet to sort of secure this network. That that narrative would actually resonate, because you'd have massive decentralization, you would have low energy, and you'd have a very secure programming language under which you could do a lot of very interesting things. So yes, if you were to try and pull something like this off, the block speed of Chia, its ability to do advanced L2s, yes, that's exactly what you would be setting up. And I think that that's the thing that, maybe we haven't covered enough even on our show, is like, I got pretty frustrated not seeing enough movement in this direction. But there's actually been pretty substantial movement in the direction of trying to do high speed stuff on Chia, and establishment of like, how do you do a better L2 than Lightning. So to try and pull off a worldwide global currency on Bitcoin using the Lightning technology is not going to be successful. But could you do like some more advanced thing? I think that it's been talked about on Bitcoin, but Bitcoin, doesn't have a sufficient way of doing smart contract programming, and so it's hamstrung in its ability to pull something like that off. Whereas in Chia, that was set up from day one, and there's been substantial advancements in the way that Chia Lisp works, even within the last few months and year, to where this is becoming like a very robust language where you could do something like that, and it actually being something that seems to be the top priority of the two main programmers at CNI, that being Bram Cohen and Art Yerkes, like that being wholly their focus.
well, and um, I hope that they. I don't know. When I see like what I think that Chia still has a lot of solutions. I don't know what the future holds, but I do hope that Chia or CNI starts to make the case for a growth in small farms as it was originally intended. I hope that they begin to. I hope that the crypto community writ large begins to understand that hating the WEF and the World Bank and the IMF, like if you actually want to do something about it, you put it on blockchain. You put a corset around it. And the same thing with the dollar. And that actually is a CBDC. And a CBDC is threatening whenever whenever you've lived like for generations under a monetary system that was only under the control of whales, of a select group of people. But with also this notion of putting a corset on it, putting a leash on it, like we can have the ability to control our own money again. And uh,
Here, I gotta point something out quick, because we talked about it, and me, I always like to ground this. And what can we see? What can we look at? Is there anything that we can really point to, right? So when we're talking about L2s and like how might you actually enact a CBDC on the Chia network, right? Surprisingly, it's sort of hidden inside this repository called Chia Gaming. And if you look at the main branch, it looks like nothing's really happening there. So you have to know how to look at GitHub. You have to know where to go to look at this stuff. But like, look, there's a lot of activity here. I mean, this is like 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. There's many commits that are sort of barreling in here. If you look at the last thing that I believe it was actually in the video where Brian Freeman and Bram were talking about, what's going on in his world, him talking about the fact that they're working on this gaming thing. So they're working on gaming within the context of like, how do you actually make a game play out in real time, right? Because if you're going to play a game, you don't want to have to wait hours or minutes or whatever to sort of make a move. You've got to be able to, I make a move, you make a move, and we're doing this, essentially in real time. And so the way you pull that off is you've got to have an L2 or a layer that exists above the chain. And sort of some of the stuff that Bram talked about in that video was, if you just make an L2 and it's sort of subject to some arbitrary set of rules, the security can go down. Like, you can actually end up in a situation where you haven't really solved the problem. You made things faster, but you might have made things worse. And there's a lot of problems with the way that the Bitcoin L2s have been established thus far. And so there have been discussions within the Bitcoin community how to make this better. And a lot of that revolves around having a better contracting language, how to make Bitcoin script better so that you can do this. Well, what's happening within this repository is there's been a proposal for a different way to do an L2, and they're actively working on it. So, if you wanted to check up on what's going on here, it's for a while, this seemed like it was maybe stalling out, but suddenly we've got this flurry of activity, and maybe it is presaging, some other thing that's really going on that's driving the real need for an L2 on Chia. It certainly isn't because the current activity on Chia necessitates it, because we aren't in a situation where blocks are mostly full and an L2 is needed to scale the chain, but rather if something is going on here where Chia does have some sort of a contract, or that they've got something that's in the works that really needs this beyond just gaming, then this is where that's being worked on in real time. So I don't have any personal inside information on whether this is the case, but it's definitely being worked on, and this would be the precursor. So to answer your question, right, can you do this on Bitcoin? Can you do it on the Bitcoin network? And me, like, very emphatically saying no, not unless changes are made. Could you do it on Chia? This is where you can catch up and sort of watch the development of this on Chia and whether it would be possible. I would say this is the precursor. This is what's required. And so if it were to be possible, it would be here that you would see it, and it's here that you need to look to catch up on the activity that's happened.
Well, and we know that they're working on the L2 solutions. The other thing that I think is crucial that the crypto community doesn't talk enough about, except when to complain when royalties are rugged, is the centralization of the marketplaces that exist on other chains. And Chia has solved that. And not only solved that, but we saw in their roadmap earlier this year that they are not just using the BLS signatures and offers to build in the marketplace into the blockchain, but also having the concept of Splash and the torrented offer files. I think is going to shows that they see I don't know, the importance of being resilient also in keeping the, I don't know how to phrase this, in keeping the assets that are recorded on Chia like available and open for exchange.
Right. It's this idea that on Chia, they never really caught a centralized market, right? Like, Chia never really found a home on a lot of the centralized exchanges. Like, not for lack of trying. I think that there was a lot of movement in that direction where Chia was trying to get on some of the centralized exchanges, but sort of had this thing in their back pocket, which was the ability to do decentralized exchange in a peer-to-peer fashion in a pretty substantive way on chain. Now, Bitcoin has something like this. It's called partially signed Bitcoin transaction. It's not as good marketing, in my opinion. But the problem on Bitcoin is you don't have the ability to make things which are durable. So on Chia, you do have the ability to make things that are durable. You can't errantly spend your NFT or your CAT, your Chia asset token as Chia. You can't errantly spend it and like sort of destroy it, which is a real problem on Bitcoin. Is like anything that's been done thus far sort of doesn't have that durability aspect to it. So to fix that problem on Bitcoin, you would need to again make an upgrade to the script. And that's why, there is this big call to say in Bitcoin that you need to upgrade the scripting language to allow for these more exotic types of things. On Chia, this already exists. And because it exists, you can make these durable things that enforce royalties on chain, that enforce that once you create an asset token, it has to stay an asset token. Once you've pounded Chia into the right shape, it stays in the shape that you expected it to be. Because you have that property and you have the ability to do a peer-to-peer trade, you don't need a centralized exchange. And so this ability to have, a market anywhere is a real value in Chia's corner. So all of the building blocks are in place here to make things very interesting on Chia. The thing that's missing, right? The only thing lacking is the actual trading the assets, the market. We've made a lot of discussions, and Chia's made a lot of discussions about how there's this carbon market, and that carbon offsets are going to be traded on Chia. I still don't see it, man. Like, I know that these projects in the Climate Action Data Trust are getting registered, and some amount of activities happening here, but I just don't hear Chia touting, hey, this month we've seen a 20% growth in the amount of carbon offsets that have been traded, and carbon retired. Like, where are these metrics? Why aren't they crowing about that? I think it's slightly because that's not really there quite yet, or maybe,
Well,
with some of the decline of,
well,
these DEI initiatives aren't really happening.
well, it's also there's it's a massive thing to change the denominator of world exchange, and
Right. The last time we saw that was Bretton Woods, right? I mean, we talked about that the other day.
absolutely. And Bretton Woods wasn't even necessarily changing the denominator of world exchange. It was the creation of the dollar as the stable coin that was based on the gold holdings of the United States.
And the two airdrops. God, I love that show. That was a great one.
I mean, and also, like we begin to understand too. I mean, the pushback for moving to commodities based exchange system. I mean, look at the narrative of BRICS. Listen to our politicians who are saying that they're going to force other sovereign countries to use the dollar. No, they're not. But we are going. I think that we are going to see. Uh, many foreign central banks who are already understand this technology more so because it gives them an alternative. And here we sit in the U.S. Or in developed nations, Canada, whatever, Australia. God bless Edward. The that we It's hard for us to see the use, like some of the promise that Chia holds for countries who have been subjugated to the dollar for the exchange system. So I think we're going to see a lot more change. I mean, look at Saudi Arabia and the responses to, like been this notion, this narrative of the petrodollar for the last 20 or 30 years. The petrodollar, I don't know if that narrative continues to exist. But now I'm wandering around in conspiracy land. Long story short, I think that Chia I still haven't seen anything else to match it. I do really hope that CNI and the Chia community make the case to small farmers, that we continue to build this chain for uncompressed plots, and understand that the price of electricity has been subsidized all throughout the world, and at the very least we should be looking towards a lower electrical draw, in supplying the consensus security of the chain. I do worry when I see 8 or 9 Nakamoto consensus, even though Ethereum's at 4. We When we were at 125, I was popping my suspenders. I hope that we can get back there.
Yeah, and I think when we're talking about farmer capitulation, right? People shutting their farms off, there's almost no incentive if you have some small amount of space. And I'm talking like if you've got something like, I don't know, 100, 200 terabytes, the amount of electrical usage that requires, especially if you're using, the standard plotting techniques, if you never switched over to this GPU stuff, there is almost zero incentive to shut that thing off. Like, it's using such a nominal amount of electricity that, it's almost innocuous. And I would say that, like, what Evergreen was doing at its very beginning days, right, when it was shipping drives, and that it didn't have any kind of centralized GPU requirement, that all of that equipment that's out there, I mean, my Evergreen stuff is still on. Like, a lot of the small farms that are just like running off of a little NAS tower, right, that's basically just using the electricity of the drives, which is like 8 watts per drive, those are going to stay on. So I think, as we were looking at, this capitulation, the drop in the net space size, we're going to start to see a hard floor, which is, well, I'm never going to shut this off because there's no point in it. And you're even hearing that within, some of the community, where some people are saying, well, I've capitulated, I shut off my big farm. Like, yeah, your big farm that was bound to GPUs and that, used this massive amount of JBODs and whatever, and you're hosted in a data center, like, or even if it's in your garage, like, there's a real world cost to that. Like, it's, hundreds of dollars per month. But if you're talking about, like, I'm using 30 cents of electricity or $1 worth of electricity, it's the same as if I forgot to shut my light on, like I left the light bulb going all night. These are things that, like, are relatively, immaterial. And especially if you're running off something small like a Raspberry Pi and you've got a few drives, I would not expect to see that space go away, like, ever. Like, that to me is just like, seems fantastical that would happen, unless you have some catastrophic destabilization of the chain, a la, Terra Luna, which I don't anticipate happening. Like, that just seems not to be any kind of a world that would ever occur. So I think what's going to happen here is you're going to see net space erosion to the point where, a lot of this GPU experimentation kind of goes away, because it's just not profitable to do it unless we go back to a substantial coin price. So that would be where I think Chia would probably be making the right move towards, getting us back towards uncompressed plots, keeping that narrative intact, and then not allowing for it to flip back to that. That seems to me like a really smart move.
Well, we will keep our eye on it, and we didn't royalties baked in, damn it, too. Like, when is Ethereum and Solana and these chains that rely on the promise of the marketplace, when are they going to realize it? Because I think Chia is going to have users like central banks, the World Bank, the IMF, large institutional users, but it's also it's a perfect bicycle for everyone in crypto, the small crypto community to be using too. I sometimes don't understand why that whole ecosystem continues to play in a place where they can have those royalties turned off, and how do you sustain a project with that regard? But we're on the end of the hour.
Well, hold on.
The bear trap.
Yeah, I said I was going to talk about it, so at least we've got it. So I think you've watched some videos from Ian Carroll, like, right? I mean, you've seen this guy talk.
Oh yeah, I like Ian Carroll. He's
Yeah. So
very
he's making a movie.
What? This is an Ian Carroll movie?
Yeah. So he did an interview recently, and I think I sent it to you, but you may have not had a chance to catch up on it yet. So he's talking for an hour with somebody about, like, what's going on with GameStop, which we have talked about, and he just shits all over Dumb Money. He's like, this is the worst movie ever. It doesn't properly represent, like, the situation, right? They're telling it as if it's something that happened. They make Keith Gill look like kind of an idiot. I think they slandered his brother. He makes some really wild assertions in this movie, and it's listed here. So, if you wanted to find the specific interview that I'm talking about, I think you got to scroll down a bit in this, because they posted it. But oh my gosh, there's a lot more things posted here than the last time I looked. So this is a pretty active account. But gosh, I thought I'd be able to scroll right to it, but apparently not. Give me 2 seconds here. I'm going to find this interview. Nope, I'm maybe not going to be able to find it very easily. Jeez, they've posted a lot of stuff recently. Anyway, so he did this interview, and basically they said they didn't feel like the movie had been properly representing the situation. So here we go. Here is the people that are making this movie, and it's your buddy right there as the producer. It's Ian Carroll. So they're working on telling this story in the way that they think is going to be better. And so that's why I listed it as, well, here's the 3 movies you need to watch: is The Big Short, Trading Places, and maybe now The Bear Trap. But here's the interview. I found it. Actually, it was right at the top. So let me just dump that on there on screen as well. So this is the one where I found out about this, and he kind of drops it at the very end. It's this interview where these 2 guys talk for about an hour, and just he pretty much just runs it down. James Lee and Ian Carroll, they're running down the full situation and kind of what happened there. And yeah, that they're at the very end, he drops it. We're making a movie. We're gonna tell this story right. And he goes, "It's not over."
I'll watch the movie. I get a little jealous of the man bun. I feel naked. I need to.
You need to grow your hair out long. See, it's like in my pictures, it's like I say I've got short hair, but man, my hair is long. I got long hair just like Ian these days.
When my hair grows long, it grows out sideways, and I look like Rasputin. So. But what I need is a powdered wig and a doily for my couch. But we need to make a crypto music. We need to make a crypto movie. We can join hands with Ian and release it conjointly with the Bear Trap.
Well, who knows? Maybe Ian makes this movie and it's successful, and then they make a sequel, like whatever the crypto is.
Well, I hope he talks to us, because we can tell the story better. Well, I'll definitely watch The Bear Trap. It's probably been since 2010 since I've watched a movie. But I will find 2 hours and watch The Bear Trap when it comes out. I may have to watch Trading Places again, because be interesting to watch that after I've lived in the world of crypto. I haven't watched Trading Places since I was a child.
What about The Big Short? When was the last time you watched that?
I've never seen The Big Short. I read The Big Shorts.
Okay, man. Well, like there's your weekend. Like you need to sit down and watch those 2 movies back to back. If you haven't seen The Big Short, it is a masterpiece of filmmaking, and it's great. It's really, really great.
I know. Oh, actually, the Alamo Drafthouse Cinemas has been bought out, but I used to know some of the people at Alamo Drafthouse Cinemas. I should trot the idea to them to have a financial. They used to have the Lord of the Rings marathons and Star Wars marathons. All these they should have learn about a money marathon. Put these on.
These three. That's the trilogy.
I'm seriously gonna talk to their old PR executive, see if that ever happened. It would be great.
Okay, Ian, if you're looking for a promotional event, like, there you go. We just spitballed it right here. Alamo Drafthouse. So talk to Lucas. You want to get connected. We definitely need to talk with Ian.
I'll start working on the menu, and the beer list. But we're well over the hour, Grant. It's been a fun discussion. Farmers don't lose heart, farmers of Chia. And don't go driving your tractors to Washington, D.C. That'll get nothing done. So, all right.
The French did that. They dumped manure on.
The Americans were doing it in 1970. When have the French come up with their own ideas?
All right, Lucas. Well, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right. Ciao.